The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
Thank you, Tally Olson. I am back. You are comfortably zoned with me. Loving baseball when we were 12 and innocent. I'm Ralph Tycho, Comfortably Zoned Network, as I say, and we are located right across the bay from San Francisco, across the moat from Oakland, in the great state of California. I believe it to be the best state in the Union, except for New York, where I was born and raised. I think I have another native New Yorker with me, James Bloomer. Welcome to the network for the first time. Are you from New York?
No,
Maryland?
I was born in Illinois, Galesburg, Illinois, and I was raised on a farm in Galesburg until I was 4, and then we moved to Polo, Illinois, and then we moved when I was 7. We moved to Southern California, and I grew up in Southern California, 26 miles from Dodger Stadium.
Oh, wow. I'm a few miles from San Francisco and the great stadium there. So we have, I'm sure you're a Dodger fan.
Well, I was more of an Angel fan, believe it or not. My dad worked for Wilson Sporting Goods in Illinois, and Nellie Fox was my hero. I patterned my game after Nellie Fox. So when the Angels became real, my dad and I went and saw the White Sox every time they came into town. My mom and dad both graduated from Oak Park High School in Chicago. So
wow.
we had those ties there.
Galesburg is not that where Ronald Reagan is from?
No, he's from Dixon. Jim Sundberg, the good catcher with the Rangers, and I think he was with the Brewers, but no, the Royals. He was with the Royals, but he's from Galesburg. And
Okay.
Jim Tomey was from Peoria, and my granddad and I used to take the hogs to the stockyards in Peoria. So, and also Dan Fogelberg, the singer, was from Peoria. So that's only 30 minutes away from.
You pronounce Tomei like I pronounce Billy Bruton. You take justice with the English language, and I'm thrilled.
Well, I went to college. I went to college in University of Pacific in Stockton, and that is where Francis Thayer, who wrote Casey at the Bat, is from. So I wrote my.
You also had a quarterback come out of that. Eddie LeBaron came out of UOP. And
Dick Bass played there.
Yeah. I saw Eddie LeBaron play against the Giants, the New York Giants, the first time they were an expansion team, and Meredith was the alternate quarterback. They were pretty close in roles, and one would play one down for a while, and Barron had the slickest hands. He was just a magician, and I remember he came in with the Cowboys, and I guess it was Nolan.
He was probably at Pacific when Dave Brubeck was there, and he got rhythm.
Well, he got rhythm. High five. I'll just say high five to Dave Brubeck.
Five.
Oh, well, I prefer Dusty Baker's version. High five.
Well, Glenn Burke played for me when I ran a ball club in '75 in Waterbury, Connecticut. Glenn was my center fielder, and he and Dusty, who ironically, Dusty's brother Vic played basketball at UOP when I was there. So, yeah,
I lived in Sacramento for a long period of time, and Dusty Baker, when he was a young kid, moved up to Sacramento from Southern California, and is incredibly big in the Sacramento baseball community and in Major League Baseball community as well. But I'll put in a good word for Sacramento, right up the road from Stockton, for their terrific baseball program. I mean, I can't.
Well, one of the guys from Sacramento, Frank Cressetti, was a teammate of my granddad's.
Actually, he was from Stockton.
Frankie Cressetti is from Stockton? Really?
Yes.
I thought he was.
Yeah.
I know John McNamara, the ex-manager, was from Sacramento.
Right, and I'd like to thank John McNamara's ghost for not putting in Stapleton so my Mets could win the World Series. But that, we could talk baseball and just go from name to name and come up with stuff. What was baseball like for you when you were 12?
Well, I played on the best team. I played at Covina American Little League, and we were the best team in California. I was a catcher, and I'd been tutored by Johnny Roseborough. The Dodgers would send some of their frontline players out to my Little League to give us, clinics. So Johnny Roseborough taught me how to frame pitches when I was 10 years old. Wow. we kind of had a leg up. Johnny Warehouse and not Parker. I'm trying to think of some of the extras Dodgers would come out. We never saw Don Drysdale, Sandy Koufax, Ron Fairley, Maury Wills, but the only starter we ever got was Johnny Roseborough, and he came out every year for an American Little League. And I don't know. When I was 10,
let me interrupt you. Let me interrupt you for 1 second to get a very important point in. Speaking of Johnny Roseborough, I'm not going to sway very much from the conversation. I was the Topps representative in the 80s and 90s. I would go to minor league cities and sign players to obligate them to the big leagues, baseball card-wise for Topps. And one of the rovers for the Dodgers was indeed Johnny Roseborough. And I was a New York Giant fan. When they moved to California, I became a Giant sympathizer. So it was ironic meeting Johnny Roseborough, and not only meeting him, hanging with him for a long period of time in conversation. And I looked him in the eye once, and I said, rumor has it that there's no love lost that you and Juan Marichal have become friends. And he looks at me and goes, yeah, we're fine. We're fine with all of this. And I had the guts to look him back in the eye and say, I think being a friend is overstated. Am I correct? Are you really friends? And he kind of half smiles at me, and I say, I was in my 40s. I knew a little bit about human nature. It's very difficult to be friends with somebody who hits you with the baseball bat or vice versa on the head. I don't know.
Agree.
And that bothered me. I told him, I said, the fact that you guys made up is fine. And I know Marichal came over and pitched with the Dodgers for a while after that, not publicly. But would you look at me and tell me that friendship, the word friendship, is kind of overstated? And he just smiled. He goes, ah. And he looks at me and he shakes his head. And in a way, he says, nah, well, you know, overstated. He was a gentleman and a good man.
Yeah, he was. I love Johnny Roseborough. I thought he was the best.
Yeah, if one can't speak poorly of someone who literally assaulted him, he in a different era, in a different age, he'd have spent time in jail.
Yeah, definitely. So ironically, that day that Marshall hit Johnny Roseborough over the head with the bat, my Little League team had won the regionals, and we were in from Covina American. We flew up. It was during the Watts riots in 1965, and
I remember them well.
And we lived in Covina, and it was shorter for us to just drive over to L.A. International and fly to Portland, where the regionals were, but they had us fly from Ontario Airport to L.A. and then to Portland. So we get up there and we get rained out for like 7 days in a row, and we didn't pick up a ball. I don't know why we didn't, but we didn't pick up a ball in a week, and then we went out and got beat by Klamath Falls, and so we were one win away from going to Williamsport, Pennsylvania, and we didn't make it. So we fly home on Sunday, and I walk in the door to my house, and I turn on the TV, and there is Johnny Roseborough getting beaten over the head by Juan Marichal. And I was not a Giant fan whatsoever. I hated the Giants because, you know, in Southern California, if you like the Giants, you better not say anything.
The great rivalry between teams continued, at least for a while, out in California. It wasn't as intense, but because nothing could be as intense as the Brooklyn Dodgers, New York Giants, Gents playing each other. It was, I grew up in those days, and as a kid, it was unbelievable. You'd stand on the street corner with your friends and argue, Giants, Dodgers, Yankees, and there was no middle of the rotors. You were either a Giant fan, a Dodger fan, or a Yankee fan. And one made no bones about it. Tough part for me is when they left, and those 5 years, who to root for, who to be mad at, should be, you know. They were tough years for a kid, and I was 12 when that happened, and so you get, at 12, you get a maturity as a baseball fan, and as a human, you know that life ain't perfect, and that you're going to have to make decisions about personal loyalties. I stuck with the Giants.
You know that Jackie Robinson was traded to the Giants, and he refused to suit up with the Giants, and he retired. But there was great animosity in that Brooklyn clubhouse for the Yankees and the Giants. They hated them. So I just want to say that Jackie Robinson was influenced by an article in Look magazine that he ghost wrote about it all. And that was part of his decision not to go to the Giants. Anyway, that he became an executive with chock full of nuts,
and died very early, and
50 years old.
Yeah, 53 or something like that. That was terrible. Anyway, let me ask you about being 12 and real life in baseball. What were you most shocked you the most about growing up a baseball fan at that age, and then seeing life in the baseball world when you became a sports writer yourself? And how does being 12 how did being 12 affect your baseball career?
Well, my grandfather started out as a catcher, a left-handed catcher at St. Mary's in Baltimore. And, it's in the genes. I was just a natural catcher. And I learned about pitching. My dad was a great he loved Paul Richards of the Baltimore Orioles and the White Sox, and he had a book written by Paul Richards about pitching, and he kept that next to his Barcalonger his whole life. Fortunately I got to meet Paul Richards and interview him down in Fort Worth later in my life, but when you have that kind of influence, my dad was a great baseball guy. I mean, he knew baseball, and we practiced perfect. When we took infield, he would hit a ball to the third baseman, and he'd make the play. He'd hit a ball to shortstop. If the shortstop made an error, he'd go back to the third baseman. We practiced perfect every infield. So that there's a lot of pressure in that because, the guy that's hitting the infield, he can hit one real hard and make the guy look bad. But we had excellent defense. We played great defense. We weren't home run hitters. We only had one guy that really hit home runs, but we gelled. And I called the pitches. My dad never called the pitches. So when you're getting the kind of coaching that I got, just for instance, Rudy Mioli played on, he was the shortstop for 3 of Nolan Ryan's no-hitters. And he was my shortstop on my little league team when I was 8. Rudy was 10. And then he went on. But the other guys that have played... Who was the best athlete on that team that never went on? Howard Hawkins, our shortstop. His dad was the mayor, and he went to basketball. He was a star basketball player at Lovin University. But, none of those kids went on. Himself? What's that? Could Hawkins have been a major leaguer himself? Oh yeah, definitely, definitely. Yeah, he was big. He had the range of like a Ron Hansen. I don't know if you remember Ron Hansen, but he was a rangy shortstop. And but Howard saw himself as a great pitcher. All right, and I handled Howard pretty well as a hitter. And we had the 3 pitchers that pitched on our little league team. When we got the all-star team, I was comfortable with those guys, so I just had the same staff that I caught all year in Little League, and that was Tommy Licata, who was a home run hitter, and Dick Collins was a left-handed knuckleballer, and Dave McNamara was a rangy, hard. He threw real hard, so. We just went through the playoffs with those 3, basically, and it worked out for us. We played 2 tournaments in El Monte at Freddie Lynn's little league, and Freddie would sit there and watch us. Oh wow! I grew up playing against Fred in high school, and my best friend and my best man in my wedding, lived with Fred Lynn and Rich Dower at USC in 72 and 73 when we won national championships. And Craig Barnes was his name, and he played with the Giants. But really a good man.
Good. What disappointed you about baseball, as it turned out?
I got a college education out of it, so I came out smelling like a rose. I love the game. There were always politics. You know, I could hit I was a left-handed hitter, and I could hit left-handers, and my college coach didn't think I could hit left-handers, so he never played me against left-handers. So that was frustrating, you know. But you know, I had the best coaching growing up going. And then when I got to college, I had an administrator. He wasn't a coach. He didn't know baseball. He was an administrator. And it was just very frustrating when you know more than the coach, and he knows you know more than the coach.
Right.
Scott Boras was my – go ahead.
It doesn't sound like you were afraid to tell the coach that you knew more than him in so many words.
We had some pretty intelligent baseball players there. Scott Boras was my roommate, teammate, fraternity brother for 4 years there. And we had a little center fielder by the name of Franz Viarello who would remind you of Joe DiMaggio. I mean, he was a tremendous ball player. We had some talent, but we just didn't. We had a real good college team my freshman year, and unfortunately, all the pitching left, and we were never good after that. So, UOP isn't known for their baseball program.
James, you mentioned Scott Boras, and I have to pick up on every little thing. What made Scott Boras? You knew him well. What were some of the reasons he became as successful as he did as an agent?
Well, he followed me around. He did everything I did.
Okay. I told you were modest, and you just had a funny way of showing it.
I never used an aluminum bat in a college game. They approved them in 1973, and I was born and raised playing baseball, not ping ball, so I never used an aluminum bat. I'd buy my bats from the California Angels, and I'd get Major League Wood, and Scott Boras would steal them from me. So he still owes me for 5 baseball bats.
Hey, that's pretty indicative of how he works. I mean, he owes you. Let's put it that way. And,
well, my folks took Scott Boras out for his first 7-course meal in Easter week up in San Francisco. We were playing a Easter week tournament at San Francisco State, and my folks took Scott and myself out to dinner at Bardelli's, which is a very fine restaurant. And
yes.
Scott didn't know what fork to use. That kind of restaurant.
So he's come a long way. What did your dad do for a living?
He was a sales rep for Wilson Sporting Goods in Chicago, and then he took the family to California, and he got his master's degree in counseling from San Diego State University with a minor in psychology. And he got that job at West Covina High School as a guidance counselor. And his whole career was guidance counseling at West Covina High School. That's what he did. And at West Covina High School, Cat Wooden, John Wooden's brother, was our principal. So, and our coach, basketball coach, Barry Porter, had played for John Wooden at UCLA. So the relationship between West Covina and UCLA was very strong. I saw the first game in Pauley Pavilion, and I saw the game where Lou Alcindor and Mike Warren beat the varsity by 15 points, and Sports Illustrated said the two best teams in America are on the UCLA campus.
Well, there was a tennis player, and I think his name was Heinz, and he played on that varsity team with John Warren.
Kenny Heinz.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I got to know him playing tennis in Sacramento.
Did you ever play against Arthur Ashe?
No, I didn't. But I wasn't at his level, but I aspired to be, and I remember hitting balls with him and talking basketball at the same time.
They had some great athletes that were great in other sports. Keith Erickson was an All-American volleyball player, and he was instrumental in starting pro volleyball, which actually started in Seal Beach, California, and they started that in the early 60s, and it went on.
I still hear in my back of my mind, I still hear Chick Hearn announcing those games. For not those games, but when Erickson played with the Lakers, there were some great teams.
I lived and died with the Lakers when they couldn't beat the Celtics. They finally beat them when Elgin Baylor had retired. that broke my heart because those guys were so good for so long, and they couldn't beat them. They just could not beat the Celtics. And the irony of that is Bill Sharman, who is a Celtic star, he belonged to my church in Covina, California, and so every time we went to church after basketball season, we had to see Bill Sharp. he was a great guy. He was a great guy, and I loved him. But
when Sharman and Cousy played in the backcourt for the Celtics, and backed up by Sam and Casey Jones, long time ago.
Yep.
We got off the subject of your dad. I wanted to know, and getting to know you, what are a couple, 2, 3 things that your dad taught you that got you through life?
My dad was a great father. I mean, he was a strict disciplinarian, and he was wounded in World War II by a sniper over in Monte Cassino, Italy, and the sniper blew his left shoulder off, and they had to rebuild his left shoulder. So he was in rehab for 2 years. So, and through that experience, he picked up smoking cigarettes. So he smoked Pall Malls and smoked a lot of them. And my mom was a nurse. He met my mom in high school when they were kids in high school. But when he was rehabbing, he kindled that relationship with my mom, and they got married, and they moved to Morning Sun, Iowa. And he was a coach in Morning Sun, Iowa. And you remember the pitcher that hit Tony Canigliaro, Jack Hamilton?
Yes, I remember. A big, tall,
black haired. He was burly. Yeah. He was a big, heavy set, and he threw hard. And my dad coached Jack when he was a kid in Morning Sun, Iowa. And there was always speculation that Jack Hamilton threw at Tony Canigliaro, and I'm here to tell you that was not the case. He did not throw at Tony Canigliaro on purpose. Tony froze at the plate and took it right in the eyeball. And there are some players that have a natural tendency to freeze when they're thrown at, and that happened to Tony. some guys have carried the torch for 40 years about Tony getting hit, but I'm here to tell you, Jack did not throw it at. If he had thrown at Tony on purpose, it would have been like Gil McDougall and Herb Score,
Yeah. But, number 12, Gil McDougall.
Yeah, and Jack continued in his career, and in fact, the Angels gave Tony Conigliaro an opportunity when he was making a comeback, and he hit 35 home runs for the Angels. So he still had the powerful swing, but his unfortunately
he died of a heart attack. He was in a coma for a while, and his brother Billy also passed away, from what I understand.
Well, Tony was a newscaster in San Francisco at
yes,
KGO,
he was.
I think it was, and that's a high pressure job. It really is. So, but
actually, raising 3 kids as a garbage man is a high pressure job. Being an announcer, being an announcer making 5 times more than the average guy, it's not really all that high pressure. But in some ways, I know what you're saying. Hey, let me ask you about your grandfather, your other grandfather. You mentioned one. He was also from Maryland, if I'm not mistaken. And you put grandson of Babe Ruth on your Facebook heading, so right. I don't feel bad about asking you the circumstances of that. I would have loved your grandmother, by the way.
Well, my great-grandfather was murdered in Baltimore on Utah Avenue. He owned a bar there, and the Babe would work for him when he was after, he got out of St. Mary's. And he got in a fight one night out behind his bar, and he hit his head on a curb and he died. And my grandfather had a relationship with Ty Cobb. They were pretty good friends. And Ty was 10 years older than my granddad. But Ty had lost his father to a violent act. His mother had shot his dad when Ty was 17, and that was the same age that my great-grandfather was murdered when Babe was 17. So they kind of had that in common. So, and people don't know this, but Helen Woodford, my granddad's first wife, actually dated Ty Cobb later when they got a divorce. So,
Whoa.
Yeah, they were close. Ty Cobb and my granddad were close. They had a rivalry playing baseball. Ty Cobb was not fond of my grandfather's style, and one time he told my granddad, he said, I could hit home runs, but the game is action. And so he goes out and over the weekend he hits 5 home runs for Detroit. And I think the biggest thing that Ty Cobb really envied my grandfather was winning pennants and world championships. That really got in his craw because he never won a ring. Or they didn't give rings in those days. They gave
right. The proverbial ring. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Okay. Something about your grandfather that we don't know as fans.
We don't know what?
Can you tell us something about your grandfather that would surprise us being fans?
Yeah, he raised pit bulls. He bred pit bulls. He had his home Home Plate Farm in Sudbury, Massachusetts, which I visited. And my logo is Home Plate on my business card. I have a 3 on a home plate. And his farm in Sudbury was Home Plate Farms. And, he raised pit bulls, and which is ironic because last Father's Day, I've never owned a pair of green shoes in my life. But I went to Dick's Sporting Goods. I bought a pair of green shoes, and I'd go up to visit Babe Ruth, my grandfather's Home Plate Farms in Sudbury, Massachusetts. And I knock on the door, and the guy that comes to the door is Joe Green. The owner is Joe Green. Yeah. My granddad talks to me all the time. I'm telling you, I get more synchronistic things happen in my life because of the Babe. He had a world of influence on a lot of people in the world. There was nothing phony about my granddad. He was the real thing.
Well, he passed away, but before he passed away, he was a patient at French Hospital in New York. And I was born at French Hospital in New York a few years before that. So I always think of the Babe as someone who spent some hours in the same place I did. I spent some hours.
Well, you know that August 16th, the day he died, in 48, Elvis Presley died on the same date in 77.
It's amazing how your mind works very much like mine. We could probably continue this conversation for 5 straight hours. And I mean that. Because one thing, when you kibitz baseball, I call that kibitzing baseball, you never run out because one conversation leads to the next. So I'm going to officially invite you back to these airwaves in the near future. And I really...
Can I share one anecdote with you that I had today?
Sure.
Okay. In 1984, I coached a T-ball team in the same league that Jack Snow played in. It's called Seal Beach Kids Baseball. And this T-ball team that I was coaching had the Dodgers. Mark Cressy was the bullpen coach for the Dodgers, and his kid Brad was playing on the T-ball team with my nephew, Tommy Cleghorn, and Rose Goodman, who Steve Goodman wrote The City of New Orleans. He was a singer-songwriter. And so I coached them, and Brad went on to play at LSU on a very good team that won the College World Series. Well, I'm sitting in my dad's TV room with him watching LSU, and Mark Cressy, his dad, is in the stands, and Brad hits a home run to win the World Series for LSU. Okay? So today I'm at Doubleday Field, and this family comes up, and we start talking, and I say I'm Babe Ruth's grandson, and they start, and one thing leads to another, and Brad Cressy, they were from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and Brad Cressy had given him a golden ticket to the National Baseball Hall of Fame. So I gave him a ball, a Doubleday ball, and gave Brad a letter. So hopefully he'll get in contact with me because those were good times. I enjoyed Seal Beach a lot.
And I want to tell you that Jack Snow, when he grew up, was my buddy's next door neighbor in Long Beach.
In Collegeville? College? No, college.
I don't know where. I don't remember where. We were both living. Ernie Rosenberg.
College Park. They had a place, an area called College Park, and that's where JT lived.
Yeah, and his kid was a tremendous. You were talking about the football player. I was talking about the football player was Ernie Rosenberg, a Prudential life insurance agent who was my buddy, and talked about what a terrific guy Jack Snow was. And
Roman Gabriel was the quarterback, and Roman had played at Cal Poly. That's just outside of West Covina. That's in Pomona. And that whole John Arnett, that whole group there were a lot of different family lines that crossed with those players. And Dick Bass had gone to Pacific. I didn't know I was going to Pacific at the time that Dick Bass was playing for the Rams, but I love those Rams. I mean, Merle Olsen and all those, Rosie Greer, all those guys.
Greer came from the Giants. Lundy was a great defensive end, a real
the fearsome
stud.
Foursome.
Right. So we don't only have to talk about baseball. We have football in common on some levels. Please come back and join us at the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network.
Anytime you call, Ralph. Anytime you call.
Thank you, my friend. It'll be fun. It was fun today, and I'm appreciative of having a guest that can interest me for an hour or so. And
cool.
We did it. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Ralph.
All right. James Bloomer, and I'm Ralph Tycho, the weak link of it all around these parts. And talk to you when we do. Adios and happy trails. Adios.
The proceeding has been a Comfortably Zoned network production. You are advised to keep your dreams wet, your humor dry, your children and grandchildren out of military recruiting offices and off the laps of clerics who wear dresses. Thank you for listening, everyone. Happy trails.